あるよ。
Umihara Kawase Shun. This is another one of those weird import PS1 games I've got, and I'm actually pretty passionate about this. If you're not familiar, this is a sequel to a game known as Umihara Kawase. It was a Super Famicom cult classic that actually ended up spawning a manga, apparently. I'm just learning about this now. That's actually really cool. I wonder if it's translated. Either way, it is a bit of a cult series of games, which has mostly stayed in Japan. It wasn't until, what was it, Yumi's Odd Odyssey on the 3DS did we actually get one in North America. And since then, we have had 2 iterations of it on the Switch, and pretty much all the iterations on Steam. And it's important to know that, because if you want to play this game, not only can you get it on Steam, I recommend you do, because I all but guarantee it's going to be a better experience than what I'm playing here, because this version is a little bit weird. There was 2 releases of this game, you see, and I've got the early release. The later revision fixed and changed some stuff, and I think it added some stuff too. Now, the story itself is non-existent. It is primarily an arcade-driven game, but from what I understand, you play as the titular Umihara Kawase, traveling sushi chef extraordinaire, armed with her pink backpack, rubber fishing line, and green shorts. She's ready to rock, going through a maze of disjointed, surreal landscapes, all themed around seafood, in her quest to, well, I don't know, be the best sushi chef ever, maybe? There's not really much of a plot here, honestly, unless you count the weird googly-eyed goldfish on the game over screen. Maybe that's the plot. Maybe the whole world is just one weird, distraught-looking, googly-eyed goldfish. Makes you think. Except it doesn't. But again, the story is honestly not even in the game. It is primarily an arcadey experience. Again, if you're not familiar with this series, it is primarily a physics-based platformer, with the overall goal being to escape a labyrinth comprised of individual rooms. Each room has multiple exits, and you're trying to find ostensibly the way out. Like the original Umihara Kawase, however, this game is fairly advanced for its time. It has a really impressive physics engine, for one thing, as your biggest mechanic is utilizing your rubber fishing line as a grappling hook. And unlike other games where a grappling hook is simply a tether to one point that allows you to swing across at fixed intervals, instead this one is based entirely on a physics system. Seriously, outside of Umihara Kawase, I've never seen a grapple system work quite like this. You'll fling your fishing line out, it'll hit a piece of environment, at which point it'll just sort of sit there. If you want to actually utilize your grappling hook as a grappling hook, you either have to run and jump to, clear gaps, or by pressing up and down on the D-pad, you adjust the tension of the line, which will, because your line is effectively made of rubber, bounce you all over the screen based on the physics. And this is how you get around this game, utilizing the actual physicality of your fishing line, because you can use it to sort of sandwich your line between bits of environments to give you a sort of a slingshot effect, or using the tension to do something similar. And it's mastering this sort of physics system that is ultimately going to allow you to succeed at this game, because it is a game where you can platform around pretty easily, and picking up the basic mechanics is relatively easy enough, but it is a very, very complicated system once you actually try and interact with it on a deeper level. Put short, it's easy to pick up and hard to master, but it's a lot of fun. Interestingly, because this game is sort of based around a timer, the game lends itself very easily to speedrunning, and this game actually has some interesting quality of life things to help you succeed in that regard. Whenever you get to a new room, regardless of whether or not you clear it, you unlock it for a time trial mode, which allows you to tackle that one individual room to see how fast you can get through it and explore the different doors. This means that you can practice on the stages that you couldn't get past before to get a better time so that you can handle the gauntlet that is the whole game. I like that a lot, because in the previous games, all you really could do is get as far as you could, and if you got stuck, well, then you just had to do it over and over again until you got back to that room to practice, and eventually take on whatever's after that. Here, if you get stuck, you can practice until you get it down, and then handle the whole gauntlet with a lot more experience and a better idea of how to handle each situation. That's fantastic. You know what another really cool feature is? This game, along with the Super Famicom version, which is arguably even more impressive, has a replay function. In the days of live streaming, share buttons, and the fact that recording devices can be bought for less than $50, that's not that big a deal, but you have to understand, back on the Super Famicom or the PlayStation, if you did something cool and you wanted to show it off, well, you just had to do it live, really. It wasn't until these games, which would actively save recordings of your runs. Because of this, you no longer had to do a special feat live in front of your friends, or I guess the only other alternative is to find an old VHS lying around, record over your parents' wedding footage with very, very choppy, very messed up Umihara Kawase footage, and then show your friend that way, and then probably get grounded. No, instead, now you can just go through a menu and say, I like that run, I want to save that run so I can show it later. That's an amazing feature that basically no other game that I'm aware of around this time actually took advantage of. Well, there were demos on Quake and Doom, but those were on computer and not relegated to a single small CD on a PlayStation or a tiny Super Famicom cart. It had a lot more power behind it to record all those inputs and then play them back, whereas this is effectively doing the exact same thing with substantially less power. It just shows how incredibly ahead of its time Umihara Kawase was. I mentioned before that there really isn't much of a story. Well, there's interstitial cutscenes you get sometimes, where Umihara sits you down and has a discussion about all the wonderful Mitchell's fishing apparatuses she uses that you can buy in stores now. Yeah. This game has ad breaks in it for some reason, and I'm really hoping that helped pay for the game, but it's weird and it completely removes you from the entire experience. This is why I would recommend getting the Steam version or the later PS1 release, because the original edition of this has these ads in it that just stop the game for advertising fishing products. And out of all the products in the world, I guess that would be the most fitting if you have to have them here, but it just stops and starts the game and feels weird and out of place and awkward to have my cute fishing sushi chef anime protagonist turned sales pitch woman on me. It doesn't fit right, you know? Fortunately, that's all removed in the later editions of this game. So if you get a second edition, you're fine, but first editions have to put up with this. And it's just a weird low point in the game that just feels out of place. This game also features bosses every once in a while, but they're handled a little bit weird. I guess they kind of have to be, though. The combat in general is just hook an enemy with your fishing line and reel them in. You can't really do that with the bigger enemies, so you just sort of have to avoid them for a while, and then they just jump off ledges and then you win. It's a little bit of a weird thing, but the original had this problem too. Some of the platforming and obstacles do get very, very tricky, especially when moving platforms and spikes get introduced. It becomes a lot more treacherous, and it happens very, very quickly. This game is not easy, it is a very challenging game, and you are limited with the number of lives you can get, although there are more you can find in the environment, as symbolized by pink backpacks. Unfortunately, they are usually very tricky to find and require a fair bit of skill to actually get. I know there's one on the first boss that's like this platform way underneath the stage, and you have to like fling yourself across a pit of death to try and get it. It's tricky, but if you manage to get a handle on the physics, worth it. And that's Umihara Kawase Shun in a nutshell. It's a very simple game, really. It's an arcadey style execution skill test more than anything, and I guess an exercise in trying to find the best route through the maze. But it takes a very simple concept of platforming with a grappling hook and refines it. It's challenging, but it is a fun way to test your skills. And just in general, it's a great game with chill vibes, and it's just a fun little physics platformer that did some pretty impressive stuff for its time. The overall presentation to Umihara Kawase Shun is a fantastically chill experience. The world is bright and colorful. It uses photographs as their background, which looks a little bit weird, but it does help everything sort of pop off it a little bit better. It's a very visually eclectic sort of game, but it feels very, very nice and non-stressful to explore this world. It's just a great game to play to unwind, I think. And audio-wise, I have the soundtrack to this series, and I've been playing the music on my phone all the time. It is just similarly a very, very chill and relaxing soundtrack. It's a good soundtrack just to help you unwind at the end of the day, or just have a very non-stressful adventure in some sort of weird, surreal seafood land. It works, and it works well. Now, if you want a copy of Umihara Kawase Shun on the PS1, cheapest copy I see right now is about $40 for the original release. Again, if this is the version you get, you're going to have those ads, which really takes you out of the experience and just feels off and weird. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but the price difference between the alternatives is not in your favor. This game was later released on the Nintendo DS, presumably without the ads, but I don't have that version, so I couldn't tell you. That's going for about $95. It's an interesting option if you want to play this game handheld. If you want the second edition that has all the ads removed, it's about $100. So you're paying roughly 2.5 times what you could the regular version just to have those ads removed. Although I think the second edition has some extra stages as well, but don't quote me on that. But I think the real golden boy here is Steam, because you can get Umihara Kawase Shun Steam Edition for about $16, assuming you're buying it at full price. There's also a bundle containing all of the Umihara Kawase games, or at least all the classic ones, for about $40, which is not a bad deal considering that the Super Famicom game alone costs an absolute fortune nowadays. If you want a copy of Umihara Kawase Shun, Steam is not only the cheapest option, it's probably the best, most feature-complete version. And, I mean, if you want a portable version, there's always a Steam Deck if you want to invest in one, assuming you don't already have one. I like Umihara Kawase as a series. This has always been a series that fascinated me, but unfortunately the cost of the original game has always sort of made it so I couldn't. Having them on Steam is definitely a great way to fix that problem, but if you want a fun, interesting physics platformer that has a very high skill ceiling, but is very easy to pick up and play, this is a series worth picking up. It's a series that you should not sleep on because they are just great physics platformers with some really fun mechanics and probably the most unique grappling hook style I have ever seen in a game. There's a reason why Umihara Kawase is such a cult classic, and it's because it's good. It is fun to explore the maze that these games provide. It's fun to figure out where these multiple doors go. It's fun to explore this world of seafood, even if the bosses are a little weird. And it's fun to just mess with the physics. Seriously, if you want a unique platforming experience, you need to check out Umihara Kawase Shun.